So effectively what we do is, what we call it is truth, tools, training, transformation. So we start off by trying to get to the source of the truth, which is invariably the customer. And then we use those insights, and with a combination of tools that we have and training that we can deliver, we drive transformation back into companies we work with. And it's kind of as simple as that, really.
Welcome to Jane Jackson Careers, a podcast that takes your career to the next level. Here's your host, Jane Jackson, author of Amazon Careers bestseller, Navigating Career Crossroads.
Welcome to my Careers podcast, where I interview fascinating professionals who've made amazing career changes. Now, today I have a really interesting gentleman called Cian McLoughlin, who I met a few years ago and I've always been really impressed with. Now, a little bit about Cian. With a sales career spanning almost 20 years, including senior management roles in a number of the world's largest software companies, Cian is the founder and CEO of Trinity Perspectives. That's a sales and training consultancy firm. Trinity is committed to helping businesses unlock their latent potential of their customers' insights and evolve to meet the changing needs of their customers. Cian has trained and advised sales professionals from Brisbane to Bangkok, Christchurch to Cape Town, and everywhere in between. And he's the author of Amazon #1 bestseller, Rebirth of the Salesman. A regular sales and marketing commentator in the mainstream media, Cian's blog was voted as one of the top 50 sales blogs in the world in 2015 and again in 2016. And when he's not helping companies improve their sales batting average, Cian's an avid traveler, a sportsman, and a rather mediocre cook. So we won't talk about his cooking expertise today, but there's a little known fact that Cian has just shared, and I didn't even know this myself. He's had a brief stint as a TV comedy writer. Cian, is there anything that you don't do? Welcome to the show, Cian.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, Jane.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to finding out all about this, because there's so much more than just the rebirth of a salesman, right? So how about, to kick us off, can you tell us a little bit about your early days and what were your early career aspirations?
So my first career aspiration, I remember it very, very vividly, was to become a stuntman. I always wanted to be a stuntman, and I think it may have coincided with, there was a show on TV when I was a kid, which was a guy called, I think it was Lee Majors, and he was a stuntman, and that was it. I just wanted to be him. So that was the first one, and then that evolved over time to wanting to be a doctor. So I don't know if there's a combination between, stuntman and injuries and then wanting to become a doctor, but I saw myself potentially moving into the medical profession. What I definitely didn't see when I went to university, so I did a degree in English and French, and I did a postgrad in business. At no point did I ever think I would be in the sales profession. And as it turns out, most people I've met in the sales profession, none of them ever considered a career in sales. So it's fascinating, I think, how we set out in one direction and then through fate or circumstance or any number of other things end up going in an entirely different direction and find our way quite nicely.
Yeah, well, that's really quite interesting. Studying French, studying business, wanting to be Lee Majors. He was the $6 million man.
He was. That's right.
I remember that. And then a doctor. How things change. So
Indeed.
How did you decide, or how did it actually happen? Because you've worked for some amazing companies like SAP and Cognos before going into your business. So talk us through briefly how your career evolved.
Like so many good stories, it involved a woman who I met. I came out to Australia almost 20 years ago with a backpack, having just finished my university postgraduate diploma, and decided I'd take a year and I'd travel. And in doing that, I went to a lovely place called Fraser Island off the coast of Queensland and met a very, very nice young woman who was also backpacking. She was traveling from South Africa at the time. And 20 years later, we're still together. That's my wife, Shelley. And we both decided to stay in Australia. And at that stage, I was playing football for a team. And the guy on that team, an English guy, was a recruitment consultant. And I went to him with a bit of a predicament. And I said, look, I need to stay in Australia longer than my 12-month visa. I've got a degree, I've got a postgrad. I'm pretty keen to find a good job. And he said, right, I'll get you 10 interviews and, see how you go from there. One of those interviews was with a very small software company that had started a year or two before. I went in and interviewed with their CEO, and I remember vividly sitting in the interview and their CEO asking me, "So what do you know about sales?" I said, "Absolutely nothing." And he said, "What do you know about IT or software?" And I said, "Absolutely nothing." And he was sitting there kind of staring at me going, "Why am I interviewing this guy?" And I noticed that he was wearing boat shoes or deck shoes. So I said to him, I spent some summers working in France when I was studying French, and I spent some time working on the yachts in the south of France. And one of the things when I went first to get a job on the yachts, and I was asked, have you worked on yachts before? I said, no, I haven't. And the person who employed me said, well, that's great, because I can teach you how to do things and you'll do it exactly that way. You won't come with any preconceived ideas. And I said to this guy, look, I think I'm pretty smart. I think I learn very fast, but I don't have any preconceived ideas. So you tell me what you want me to do, what you need me to do, and I'll do it. And I'm not sure if it was the Irish accent or just the arrogance of youth, but somehow he bought that line and gave me an opportunity. And that was, almost 20 years ago. And my career has sort of continued to grow and evolve ever since.
Yeah, you know what that brings to mind is that people hire for attitude, because you can train people up anytime, but if you don't have the right attitude and that positivity in your story exudes, it's like, okay, it's not the arrogance of youth. I think it's, show me and I'll learn and I'll become really good at it.
Well, I think that must have been what he thought. And that was a fascinating conversation, because towards the end, by the time he was prepared or had offered me the job, I then sort of sprung the surprise package, which was, oh, by the way, I need you to sponsor me in order to stay in the country. And he was like, whoa, hang on a second. That's a very large commitment on our behalf to do that for someone. And I said, yes, I agree, it is. But equally, I'm committing my career to you, to this organization. So I think that's a pretty large commitment on my behalf as well. It's a requirement in order for me to join you. And again, he took the bait, and then my fate was sealed.
They always say the Irish have the gift of the gab. I think you probably do. Yes. Talk your way into anything.
And possibly.
And so what was that first role that you went into?
So that was what you would call nowadays an inside sales role. So back when people still had desk phones, I was the guy picking up the phone and calling and saying, hi, I'm calling from this company. This is what we do. We'd love to have a chat and see if it's something of interest. And then I would set up meetings for the external salespeople to go out and actually meet with them. So that was it. That was the first role, and I really enjoyed it, and I loved it, and that was my first taste of an industry that has been very, very good to me for the best part of 20 years, and one that now in my current role in Trinity, running this business, I'm trying to give something back to that industry, and I'm actually trying to help shape and improve the business-to-business sales industry, because it's evolving. It's a huge time of change, and there's a lot of companies doing it tough, and actually there's a lot of sales professionals doing it tough as well. So I'm in some small way trying to give something back.
Yeah. You've obviously got a skill of picking up the phone and talking to someone that you don't know. So it's almost like, cold calling that some people are afraid of. Mm-hmm. And I'm an ex-recruiter, and I had to make my cold calls as well, but I break out into a terrible sweat because I don't like making sales calls. And I think that's where sales training is so important. So you started right from, like the ground up.
Absolutely.
But you enjoyed making those calls.
Well, at first it was certainly challenging, but I think one of the things that worked to my advantage was, 20 years ago, firstly, there were phones on desks. And so you were more likely to get hold of someone. Mm-hmm. Secondly, and you kind of alluded to this, being Irish maybe gave you a slight advantage in Australia because of the accent, and also because so many people have some level of connection to the country of Ireland and their heritage. And so it became a talking point. And also what I tried to do was take the pressure off people. So I'd say, look, if this isn't a good time, I can give you a call back. And if you're not the right person, maybe you can introduce me to the right person in the business. And by taking a little bit of that pressure off and not trying to jump straight into sales or pitch mode, quite often you would actually get someone who was, prepared to have a chat. And then you just see where it goes from there.
When you say, because looking through your LinkedIn profile and where you've been and where you've worked at Cognos and SAP, do you need, as a salesperson, do you think you need to have in-depth experience or understanding of the technology in order to be a good salesperson, or not?
It's a great question. If you did, then I would have struggled badly, because that comment that I made to that CEO at the very start about my limited or non-existent understanding of technology. I'm not a very technically savvy person, and yet I've had a career spanning almost 20 years in an industry where technology is the only thing that they sell. But the reality is, you don't need to know everything. If you have a reasonable understanding of, broadly speaking, what the technology can deliver to customers, you can then bring in experts to talk about, the bits and the bytes and the features and the functions. And actually, your role as a sales professional is more, the conductor of the orchestra in some respects. So no, I think you can be very, very successful if you have other strings to your bow. If you don't have any strings to your bow, you might struggle. But if you have, good interpersonal skills, good organizational skills, if you have the ability to have people partner around a particular project or customer need or business need, and manage that effectively, then those skills are highly valued.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and obviously you can learn and you can expand on your skill sets as well. But with sales, it's getting that foot in the door, opening the door, and then you can bring in the experts.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think one of the things, you effectively alluded to this a moment ago, where you were saying when you had to pick up the phone as a recruiter, you broke out in a cold sweat. A lot of people do. And I think there is this sense that some individuals are born to sell and others are, not. The ironic thing is, those individuals who think they're not in any way capable of selling invariably are the ones who maybe have more technical knowledge or expertise, and therefore have more credibility. And therefore, if they do get into the conversation, people are much more inclined to actually want to listen to them, because they can tell them things about the technology or about their business that they don't know, because they have all of this experience. So those individuals hugely influence the sales cycle, even if they don't perceive themselves as out and out salespeople. And a lot of the work that I've done with companies all over the world. So this year, particularly, I've been in Europe and the US, and just got back from Africa, and we'll be heading to Asia soon, all with one particularly large global client. And a lot of the time I'm spending in those organizations is actually not with people who have sales on their business card. They might have a technological role, they might have a pre-sales role or another role in the organization, and trying to tease out of them not the fact that they're salespeople, but the fact that they're incredibly influential when they stand up and open their mouth to speak, and to make them step into that and feel more comfortable understanding just how impactful they can be in their communication.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're a salesperson through and through, and this is what you live, you breathe, you love it, and you understand it so well. And so you've gone through the corporate career and, progressing in your corporate career as well. What was the catalyst to make you decide to switch into or transition into entrepreneurship and build up Trinity Perspectives, and then become an author, and then everything else that's just been an incredible journey?
That's a great question, Jane, and I think that's kind of the $64,000 question, certainly in terms of where I'm at in my life. I would say a combination of frustration and inspiration was probably the two factors that were the driving force behind it, making such a dramatic career change. Because you're right, it was. I was quite far advanced in my career, and had a reasonably clear ladder ahead of me, and then I just jumped off the ship completely, which is a slightly unusual thing to do. Maybe in your mid-30s, perhaps mid-40s, or a little bit later is where we normally hit our midlife crisis. But I hit it early, and I'm quite happy I did. For me, if I talk about the frustration, it was a combination of things. It felt like I'd stopped learning and I'd stopped growing and developing. There was a strong sense of Groundhog Day, where every year was a bigger number and a bigger target, but fundamentally there wasn't that much else changing. And stress was a huge factor for me. The stress that I experienced manifested itself for me in health issues, and particularly in heart issues. So I found myself from my probably late 20s to early 30s in ER rooms with heart issues. And the last time I had a major issue, I was lying in an ER room waiting to have my heart stopped and restarted. And I said to myself, look, if I get through this okay, I have to change something, because this isn't sustainable. So there was that issue. But then on the inspiration versus the frustration side, I think I was just starting to, in the role I was playing in these software companies, I was actually managing partners. So what that meant was I was managing smaller businesses that were quite entrepreneurial, that were quite dynamic and innovative in what they were doing. And I was working for a very, very large global company, which in many respects is great because you've got all the power and the might of this organization. But they tend to be like a big, steamer. They're very slow to turn. Whereas, I was getting to work with these dynamic speedboats that were turning all the time, and I found I was getting more and more interested in that. And so I decided, look, nothing ventured, nothing gained. If the worst comes to the worst, I can always go back and get a proper job again. But if I don't go out and try it and do something different, then I don't want to die wondering. So I did.
So it's quite a number of factors that all came together. And
yes.
It's interesting because, as you know, I work with people who are going through career transition all the time. And if they've gone through a redundancy or if they've just decided I've had enough, which is obviously what you did, but it was a wake-up call with your health, because late 20s, early 30s, experiencing such major health issues must have been quite a scare for you, and you must have reevaluated the meaning of life, perhaps?
Very much so. I think I was always a glass half full or glass completely full and brimming individual. And I think I started to lose a little bit of that in my towards the end of my corporate years. And I think I started to lose a little bit of that sense of confidence in my own self and my own abilities. And I had to kind of catch that very quickly and say what's important to me. And thankfully, I mentioned that girl that became my wife, and she's an incredibly supportive lady. And now, in fact, I'm lucky enough to say she works with me in my business as well. So, but at that time, she was working in a good job in the corporate sector as well. So we sat down and had a conversation, and I'd given myself kind of a 6 to 12 month window where I said, look, let me go out, let me try this, and in the event that I crash and burn, which is highly probable, then I'll go back and get a new job. And so her support was very, very important in terms of A, giving me the space to do it, and B, giving me the confidence to think that, maybe I can kick some goals. And I was lucky because before I stepped out, I started to structure what the business would look like, what the value proposition would be. I started to, very quietly kind of have some conversations with some prospective clients, and then quite quickly was able to bring on some initial customers and get over that hump of sitting in your second bedroom wondering what the hell you've just done. So that was nice. And then gradually you just, put yourself in an awkward, uncompromising position, and then achieve that thing, and then you move the goalpost a little bit further away, and then you achieve the next thing, and all of a sudden you realize that actually you've got way more ability than maybe you'd given yourself credit for. And that's where the book and the blogging and the media and all those other things came from. It was just dipping the toe in the water and thinking, well, what's the worst that can happen? You crash and burn, and that's okay.
It's interesting because obviously there was a lot of stress in your corporate life, and being as a sales professional with the KPIs to meet and deadlines, and you got to hit your targets all the time. Was that what contributed to your stress levels?
Yeah, that's a great question, and actually that is a fundamental question in terms of the direction that I've taken my business. I thought it was. I actually thought it was all of those things, and then it was only subsequently that I realized that actually it wasn't that at all. It was all of the things which were the unknowns in those sales activities, and was all the things that were outside of my control. I realized that was the source of most of the stress, because the stuff that you can control, you feel a little bit more comfortable with potentially, but the stuff outside of your control. So it might be, a CFO and a CEO sitting down to talk about something, and then making a decision, and you're not privy to that conversation, and you can't influence that conversation. And that conversation and that decision might determine whether the last 6, 9, 12 months worth of work that you've done amounts to something or amounts to nothing. And that to me was where the biggest frustration, I think, came from, or a lot of the stress. And so when I embarked on my business, I did something which seemed almost so simple and so obvious that you couldn't possibly build a business around it. And yet 6 years down the track, and the book and all those other things, it's turned out that you can. And what my company does a lot of the time is we do win reviews and we do loss reviews. So we go in and sit down with a customer at the end of the sales cycle, and we interview them and we talk to them and we ask them, hey, what did that IT company do well? And what did you like about it? And what did you dislike? And how did they compare to their competitors in certain areas? And we ask them a whole lot of questions. And then we take the learnings and the advice and the feedback they give us, and we feed that back in to the particular vendor organization so they can improve and so they can understand. We take away the guesswork, we take away the uncertainty. And, what ultimately, and this might sound a little bit cliched or a little bit trite, but it allows me to feel better, sleeping at night, that I know that some salespeople won't be going through the uncertainty and the doubt that I experienced in my career, because I can give them the feedback directly from the one source that matters, which is their customers. And so that's kind of cool. We're very privileged to be in a position whereby we get to see both sides of the spectrum, because that very rarely happens in big business.
Yeah, I think it's so important that you actually went through that, because having gone through the tough stuff and you understand what other sales professionals could be going through as well. Now with all of your sales training, it's how to really cope with such situations. And I know, well, both of us, run our own businesses.
Yeah.
And people can think that, oh, well, that could be very stressful too, running your own business, but it makes a difference, doesn't it, when it's your own?
It does.
Then you make the decisions at the end of the day. You're not waiting for someone to give you the okay.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, whether you win or you lose, it's your decision. It's that control is nice.
It's funny you should say that, because I do remember in the first couple of months when I stepped out of the corporate world, and I'd be sitting there in the home office, or in the second bedroom, I should say, trying to be busy during the day and working out what the hell I'd just done. And my wife would come home and she'd say, how was your day? And I'd say, look, I'm thinking about doing this thing. And the thing might be a big thing or a small thing. Didn't really matter. And she was like, okay, why are you telling me? And I was like, I don't know. And then I realized that I'd become so institutionalized in 15 plus years of corporate life that I felt the need to tell someone about a decision I was going to make or an action I was going to take before I took it to sort of get the approval. And now, 6 years down the track, I think I've gone so far to the other extreme, whereby you're making decisions all the time about technology and partnerships and the structure of your go-to-market, that we do that instinctively. But for the first couple of months, I was really struggling to make any decision, because I think I had been so institutionalized, I just didn't feel that I was allowed to make those decisions. And that was a really interesting kind of, moment of almost like an epiphany. Wow, okay, I've got to step up here and actually be a CEO.
How empowering is that? And tell, starting out in your business, now you've mentioned that you're in the second bedroom, okay? And this is something that most entrepreneurs, when you're starting out, you're either on the kitchen table or you're in the other bedroom, or you might actually be in the main bedroom if you're one. So how did you manage to grow the business so that now, I know because I can see behind you as we're videoing and recording this podcast, that you're in a lovely office environment. Tell me about that little bit of a transition, the location.
I think, it was crawl, walk, run for me. So I went probably from second bedroom to kind of like a, serviced office type environment, or not even serviced office. It was more one of those kind of places where you can go and you can bring your laptop for half a day or a day, and there's other businesses running around you. And then, a combination of factors. I loved working from home. I loved having the peace and quiet that I had, but also the ability to just go out and cut the grass on a Tuesday morning if I wanted to, or do little things like that. And I decided to be very upfront about it. So when I brought on some quite large corporate clients early on, I said, look, guys, just so we're clear, I work from home. I'm, remotely located. I can spend some time at your office site as well. Happy to do that. Or we can, if we're having meetings, I can, get access to meeting rooms, but I work from home. And effectively the response, and I think 5 years prior, that would have probably been an issue, but because of the gig economy and the way the workforce is now evolved, no one really batted an eyelid. They were like, "Look, we don't really care. Can you help us? Can you give us some insights or some knowledge or some training or some ideas that we don't have already?" And as soon as they say yes to that, you're in. And the other interesting thing is, once you get one or two clients, no one else even thinks about that, because they're like, well, other people are using you, so that's fine. And you and I can both attest to this. If you look at your website or my website or many others, you have the credibility logos. So they, they're media logos, they're customer logos, they're, the book or Amazon or whatever. And at that point, people are actually asking, have you got time in your diary to work with me, rather than the other way around. And the fact that you're working in a home office environment, ironically, they recognize you're probably going to do more for them in that environment than if you're in a big, noisy office where you're getting distracted all the time. We get to focus and they don't need to carry our overheads. That's a win-win.
Mm-hmm. Oh, without a doubt. Tell me about Trinity, the services that you provide, and also I want to hear all about the book, because that's the Rebirth of a Salesman. That's so interesting. So first of all, Trinity Perspectives. What do you offer?
So at its kind of most basic level, we're a sales training and advisory firm. We work with a wide variety of organizations, a lot of technology companies and telecommunication companies. But what we tend to do is we tend to do reviews, win reviews, loss reviews, retention reviews. So spend time with their customers and then take those learnings and insights and feed them back into these organizations so they can get better, so they can extract some value from the sales processes they go through. Because some of our clients might have a 6 or 9 month sales cycle, and it might cost them, $200,000 of time and effort and tender responses, very formal and very structured. Now, whether you're in the engineering construction space or the pharmaceutical space or any number of other spaces, if it's business to business, if your cost of sale is quite high, and if the value you'll derive from a new customer is high, then you should be reviewing why you're winning and losing your deals. Now, you can absolutely use a third party like us, like Trinity, or you can do it yourself internally, but always with a third party within your own organization. And so I started actually doing this while I was still in the corporate world to see if it made sense, because I assumed customers won't do that. They won't take an hour and a half out of their day to give you that feedback. And actually, when I wrote the book, I reached out to a lot of customers and asked them that question. Why would you do that? I don't understand. Tell me. And the reasons they gave were many and varied, but they were all saying effectively, if you've done a halfway decent job, then you've earned the right to get this feedback, and we're happy to share that. And if you're prepared as a business to listen to our feedback and then improve or innovate or take action, then that's in our best interest, because then you're going to be a better vendor to work with in the future. And we don't want a market that's a monopoly or an oligopoly. We want choice and we want competition. And so you're actually, helping us out in that respect. So customers are incredibly open to sharing this and frighteningly candid in many instances. I mean, over the last 5 or 6 years, we've had so many examples of very senior people just being completely open, completely candid. The feedback is positive, it's negative, but it's always constructive, and it's immensely valuable. So effectively, what we do is we do what we call it's truth, tools, training, transformation. So we start off by trying to get to the source of the truth, which is invariably the customer. And then we use those insights, and with a combination of tools that we have and training that we can deliver, we drive transformation back into companies we work with. And it's kind of as simple as that, really.
Oh, I like that. The 3 T's: truth, tools, and transformation. You make it sound so simple.
It's that simple.
To me, sales is still really hard. And so now, The Rebirth of a Salesman, your book.
Yes.
So the inspiration to write that?
Well, look, I as I mentioned, I have a degree in English, and I've had a background of kind of writing, over my whole life, short stories and, comedy for TV and a variety of other things. So I enjoy writing, and I think I embarked on that. It's funny, I set out to write one book and I ended up writing a completely different book. So I set out to write a book and probably got about halfway through writing a book about win-loss reviews and, how to do them. And isn't this, an important thing to do, et cetera, et cetera. And about halfway through, I realized, that's the business that I run, but that doesn't mean that everyone wants to understand the nuances of how to do that. And so what I realized was actually the real insight is the world of business-to-business sales is changing. It's evolving dramatically. What are all the customers telling us in terms of what's important to them? So that became the focus of the book. How is the world of sales evolving? And what does that mean to sales professionals and sales leaders in terms of staying relevant and staying engaged with their customers? And what do they need to do to reinvent themselves over the next 3, 4, 5 years, but even over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, to avoid being made redundant, to avoid being replaced with artificial intelligence, to avoid having customers put the phone down on them because you know what, you're not really helping us, you're not really adding any value. And so a lot of the work I've been doing over the last couple of years since the book has come out is really evangelizing that message taking it all over the world, doing, keynotes at sales kickoffs and, sales academies for companies around the world to help those salespeople, whether they're younger salespeople coming into their careers and needing some guidance, or whether they're more seasoned salespeople needing to reinvent their sales skills and disrupt some of their own skills and burn those skills and replace them. That's kind of a mantle I've taken on a little bit to help them do that, because it's a tough gig at the best of times, and I've seen too many people burning out. I've seen too many people having marriages break down or having issues with stress and health and all of those other things. And some of that comes with the territory, but a lot of that is preventable.
Mm-hmm. And with this book, and I know that it's just skyrocketed your business, because having a published book and getting to number 1 on Amazon, it's like a business card on steroids, right?
Yes.
And so I know there's a lovely story where someone read your book and now some wonderful things have happened. Tell me that story. Share it with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's been lots of wonderful moments where people have tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Were you that guy?" And and then they tell you their story, and I love that. But there was one particular scenario which was kind of interesting, where a person I'd never met before, a person I'd never spoken to before, had downloaded a copy. I did a 1-day special, a 99-cent download on Amazon, and I really should probably do another one now that I think about it. But I did a 1-day special, and a whole lot of people all over the world got access to it. And thankfully, my network were great, and they shared it as well. So for 24 hours, we made a lot of noise. And I got a LinkedIn message from someone I'd never met before, saying, "Hey, I read your book, and it really resonated with me. And could we maybe jump on a call and have a chat? And I'd like to talk." So I said, "Sure, no problem." And it turned out that individual worked for a very, very large company, a global company, and was just in the sort of final throes of building this global program for their sales team around the world. And a whole lot of things that he had read in the book really resonated with him, and he thought would work very, very nicely in the program. So they reached out to me and said, "Is there any chance that you could come and work with us and build a program and deliver the program?" And so, that was a very enjoyable activity to do. And, it's an ongoing activity. It's been a very, very lucrative activity for our business, but it's kind of just reflective of the weirdly connected world we now live in, where, you write content or you create something that's, tossing the stone in the pond. Where the ripples go, you don't necessarily know, but they go in really interesting places. And, I've been blessed, had lots of, things like that coming my way.
Oh, it's amazing how everything's worked so well for you. So I'm really pleased with regard to everything that's happened in the book. And also, I noticed that we've got someone else. Oh, she's disappeared. I'll edit that little bit out.
That's all right.
Stephanie is probably waiting for me. But with regard to your book, I like the idea of, throwing a stone in the water and the ripples, and you've reached so many people as a result of your book as well. And it's been great for your credibility. It's great for your branding. And I think every entrepreneur should write a book about their area of expertise, because it just helps to progress everything. So
I agree. It does. It absolutely does.
Yeah. Now, with sales, and so many people who may be listening want to get into sales or are sales professionals, what would you consider to be the top 3 tips for success?
I think, we've got 2 ears and we've got 1 mouth, and using them in that proportion is a pretty good strategy to start with, because sales is not about, who can talk the fastest or who can, convince someone to do something else. It's about engaging with someone in a way that's genuine and that's authentic, and earning the right to progress the conversation. We're familiar with the term beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Well, value is in the eye of the beholder also. And so I can't talk to you about something which is valuable until I know what's important to you. And then I have the context to express what may or may not be valuable. So I think, listening, asking intelligent questions and listening and coming with curiosity is very important. I also think, leaning more on your EQ sometimes than on your IQ, and focusing on empathy and social awareness is very important, because we talk about business to business or B2B, but actually that concept is a fallacy, because businesses don't buy from businesses, people buy from people, or humans buy from humans. So therefore, that ability to create a connection with someone else is very, very important as well. And I think the third thing from my perspective would be you need to be passionate might not be the right word, but you need to believe in whatever it is that you're selling. Because if you do that, then you come across as someone that people want to work with. Because if I'm going to buy something from you, Jane, whether it's a product or a service, the reality is I'm also buying you as a person. I'm buying your stories, and that's very important. So I think if you can do those three things, you're going to do okay.
To listen, to communicate well, and to also have that passion and belief in what you do. That's the winning combination. And also, those are all soft skills.
They are all soft skills. Yeah. That's the extraordinary thing. When I embarked on this 6 years ago, I thought all of the feedback we were going to get from customers was going to be very much around features and functions and price and this. And actually, if I was to sum it up in 2 words, in terms of why people make decisions to go in one direction, not the other direction, it's people and purpose. That's what drives the decisions, 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. What's interesting is, just 2 days ago, the Westpac CIO was talking about how technology and artificial intelligence, it's really changing the landscape of how businesses work. And in order for us to be able to keep up with it, the way businesses are structured needs to change. Otherwise, there's going to be carnage. And it's a bit like the boiling frog situation. I really enjoyed that article because it was, things are changing and we remain quite comfortable. And if we sit and we're not aware of, how important certain skills are in the future economy, and people always say it's going to be those soft skills. It's the communication. It is the EQ. It's the listening and understanding, because the artificial intelligence is something that will help to automate what's routine, but the building relationships are what it's all about. Yes.
That's exactly right. And I will often, if I have a group of, sales professionals in the room, I'll ask the question, how many of you want to be employed in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? And invariably every hand in the room goes up. And then the next question is, how many of you think that the skills that you have at the moment are the skills that are going to, serve you for that period of time? And every hand in the room comes down. And then, the delta on that is, what are you doing to address that situation? And that's where most people really struggle, because A, they don't know what the skills should be, and B, they're not doing anything about it.
You know what, Cian? I could talk to you all day. I'm going to have you on again because we need to continue with this. Because
that sounds good.
It's so interesting. And so now, if people want to find you, where can we find you?
You can head to our website, which is trinityperspectives.com.au. You can find me on LinkedIn. So it's Cian, Cian McLoughlin, McLoughlin, or I'm also on Twitter at Trinity Perspectives.
Wonderful. I'm going to have all of these links on my show notes on janejacksoncoach.com, so everyone can just hop over there and reach out to Cian if you would like. So thank you so much for your time, Cian. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to having you back on the show again. Let's talk more in depth about sales, because I think I'm going to learn a lot too.
I look forward to it, and thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks, Cian. Bye.
Cheers, Jane. Bye-bye. Bye.
If you'd like to find out how coaching can help you, visit janejacksoncoach.com, where not only will you be able to listen to other fascinating interviews from professionals who've made amazing career changes, you'll also be able to download some free ebooks and guides on how to manage your career effectively.
You've been listening to Jane Jackson Careers. Sign up to receive regular career advice at janejacksoncoach.com.